My name is Edie Punt. I'm here with my colleagues David Watkins, Craig Williams. All three of us are on the desktop mapping team back in Redlands. And we've been working on Pro for a number of years now, and we're quite proud of it and pretty invested in this. So before we get started, I just want to see a show of hands. How many people have started working with Pro or done any looking around? Good. Awesome. And the rest of you, I assume, show of hands, not yet cracked it open. Perfect. Both groups, you're in the right place. We're going to go through a bit of an overview of Pro, mostly with respect to authoring maps and what we have for mapping and visualization in Pro. And we're also going to show you a little bit of new stuff. So if you have been working in Pro, you'll see a few things that we are rolling out at version 1.3. So to remind you, version 1.3 is very soon to be released. I think they're saying maybe next week.
I hope.
So we'll get started. So what was our vision with building ArcGIS Pro? Like I said, we've been working on this for a number of years now, and we had a few different overarching visions that we were going for here. First of all, we really wanted to improve drawing performance and quality from what you had with ArcMap. And the reason we can do that is we are supporting a different improved graphics engine underneath. We also wanted to provide a better, more intuitive experience. So across the board, we've tried to make Pro easier to use. And we leverage a ribbon-based user interface. We've tried very hard to make an application where just the things that you need for your current task are available to you, and you're not overwhelmed with every last piece of functionality that we have. And you're going to see a lot of examples of that as we go through. We have a number of small demos that all three of us are going to be giving you that show you different capabilities in that mapping and visualization realm. We've also tried to make repetitive tasks easier. So things like setting layer properties. You can, instead of having to open each layer and set the identical property, you can do it for multiple layers at once. Working with label classes, Symbology, a lot of things are easier and more iterative with this new user interface, and you're going to see how that works. We also want to make sure that Pro is something that can extend your work. We know you have a lot of time and data and energy invested in your work so far, so it's very easy to import your existing map documents into ArcGIS Pro and continue working with them and seeing them the same way that you saw them draw in ArcMap. We also are working to add new things, of course, to ArcGIS Pro, and you're going to see some of that today. Examples of that are procedural modeling, KML support. We have a lot of things. I mean, we can't cover it all here. Certainly there are other Pro sessions as well, and down at the pavilions downstairs, you can get a lot more information. So what did we build? That was our vision. What did we actually build? One thing that was a key unifying principle of ArcGIS Pro was having a unified 2D, 3D mapping experience. So previously, we had to use different applications to work in 2D and 3D. We had ArcMap in 2D, ArcScene, and ArcGlobe. And we've tried to bring those worlds together, and you're going to see how that works as we go through. One of the things that supports that is a unified symbol model. So in ArcMap, some of you may or may not be aware of this, we had two separate symbol models. Anyone in the room work with representation symbology or representations? Couple people. Okay, so representations were actually leveraging a different symbol model than the standard symbol model in ArcMap. And then in 3D, we had yet another symbol model in ArcGlobe and ArcScene. So Pro unifies that, and we have all the power of representation symbology, all of the 3D possibilities, all in one basic symbol model in ArcGIS Pro. Another really great enhancement with Pro is that we've decoupled maps and layouts. That means that the layout is no longer tied to the map and vice versa. ArcGIS Pro is project-based, not document-based. So if you think about ArcMap being document-based, where you're working with a single MXD, in ArcGIS Pro, you have a project and you can have multiple maps and multiple layouts, and they're not necessarily tied together. You can have a layout with no map on it at all. Maybe it's just a cover page to a report. You're going to see some good examples of working with layouts from David as we go through the session. Like I said, we have modern graphics support. This is a 64-bit application, so it's smoother, it draws better, it runs faster. We have anti-aliasing support now, so we get crisper fonts, crisper line work. True transparency support. If you do cartography, this is a huge benefit in Pro. Anywhere across the system where you apply a color, you can make that color transparent. And that has really big implications. And it's true transparency. So if you're exporting your map to PDF, for example, you're going to get that true transparency support. We're not rasterizing below that. If you've ever run into that kind of thing in ArcMap, that is no longer an issue in ArcGIS Pro. I mentioned it's a 64-bit application. It's also a multi-threaded application, which means you can keep working while processes are running on a different thread. So while your geoprocessing tool is churning through something, you can still do some other work. Pro remains responsive. So some of our design goals is emphasizing your work, not the user interface. And what we mean by that is we have a newer, modern user interface, but we tried not to get too proud of ourselves and make it flashy. You'll see that it's very subtle. If you haven't looked at Pro yet, it's a little bit more subdued. The idea is your content, your maps, your data. That's what the focus is of the UI. And the user interface is there to support you, not to be flashy. I mentioned this already. We have better support for iterative workflows. So we can apply things iteratively, like symbol changes, for example. So if you did a lot of symbol work in ArcMap, you may have hit that frustrating moment where you have gone through, I don't know how many boxes, and then you have to click OK all the way back to see what kind of symbol you just made, and then you decide you don't like it. So we don't make you do that bit of pain anymore. We have a Symbology pane where you can make your changes. When you're ready, click Apply, see them immediately. In addition to this, we have a very strong undo-redo stack. So everything you do in Pro is tied to the undo-redo buttons. So if there's something you don't like, it's very easy to back out of it step by step, or even jump back a number of steps. So you'll see some examples of that. I believe Craig's going to show you that. Again, provide access to commonly changed items. So we have so much functionality in Pro. It's a huge product. We don't want to stick it in your face all at once, because that's not easy to work with for any of us. So we've tried very hard to present the items, the functionality that you need, make it easy to do the easy things, and give you a pathway to get to the more complex things, if that makes sense. And it is a unified 2D, 3D application, so we've really tried to erase those differences between our 2D worlds and 3D worlds where possible, to make it as easy as possible to work between the two, but understanding that there are still differences. So there are some differences between 2D and 3D that we have to be aware of. So in a lot of ways, they're similar. We have layers, we have data, we work with them, we have coordinate systems, but we have different goals. And here's a really good example, 2 different ways to show utility lines in 2D and 3D. So they're not identically the same. And then there's certain things that just don't make sense in 3D, and I have some examples here: multi-patches, extrusion, elevation surfaces. So how we dealt with this is we have 2 types of maps. So as I mentioned, we're in a project-based environment. We can have multiple maps, multiple layouts, a number of different project items, but there are 2 types of maps. A map can be called a map, which is 2D, and called a scene, which is 3D. And then there are actually 2 viewing modes to a scene: local view and global view. Local view corresponds to ArcScene and what the type of workflow you had in ArcScene. Global view is more like what you're used to if you used ArcGlobe. You can convert a map to a scene and back and forth. You can share bookmarks. You can copy layers. You can even set them to sync. So if you pan in one or zoom in one, in a 2D world, you're doing the same thing in the 3D world. Or you can have two 2D maps side by side and link those so they're in sync. So let's talk a little bit more about this global versus local in our scenes. Like I said, if you're familiar with ArcGlobe and ArcScene, this will be clear to you. If you were not so much of a 3D user, we'll just go through it here. The global context is for viewing sort of worldwide data. You're seeing it on a spherical surface, and you're always in the WGS84 global coordinate system. This is how ArcGlobe worked. We were able to use multiple surfaces, and it was really good for large amounts of data. ArcScene, which is now our local context, was different. You were usually looking at an area of interest. It was flat, and it could be projected. There we had local data only, not services, and 1 surface per layer. In Pro, we've erased those last 2 limitations. So now in Pro, you can have the large data, the services in that local projected viewing space. You can have multiple surfaces. So you have your 1 scene and 2 different ways to look at it. So the last thing I'm going to mention here before I hand it over to David to talk to you a little bit more about layout and export and output is some terminology changes. And this is just so you can follow along as we use these terms in our demos. So I said we have a different symbol model, so some new terminology. In the symbol context, in ArcGIS Pro, we talk about symbols based on the type of geometry they draw. So we have point symbols, line symbols, and polygon symbols, and text symbols. And within those symbols, we can have individual symbol layers, and those are related to the graphic component. So those are marker layers, stroke layers, and fill layers. And we don't go too deep into the symbol model here, but here's some terminology if you get tripped up, because they are slightly different from what we had in ArcMap. Data frames are now just maps or scenes. Like I said, globe and scene, I already covered that. The other one is color ramps. They're called color schemes in ArcGIS Pro, but they're conceptually the same thing. And there's just a little example on the right-hand side of this slide how we'd have a polygon symbol made up of 2 symbol layers, a stroke and a fill. If you worked with the representation symbology model, this makes perfect sense to you. This is how we define symbols. So let me hand it over to David, and he'll give you a little bit more info.
Thanks, Edie. So I've just got a few more slides to go through, and then we're going to get right into some demos to show you how all this works. I'm going to talk to you a little bit. We're going to change gears a little bit and talk to you about layout and layout enhancements. Of course, one of the most important enhancements for a lot of our customers is multiple layouts. This has been one of the biggest user enhancement requests we've had for years. So it's available in Pro. How many of you guys were asking for that? All of you, okay. Yeah, how many of you used ArcView 3? Yeah. All the people who are a little older.
Easy now.
Interesting. I used it a lot. I'm one of those people. So another enhancement request. You can now use 3D scenes in your layout. You can add a 3D map to your layout. This is something you couldn't do in ArcMap. We have a new layout contents pane, so that the contents that you're used to with all your layers in your map, we've got a contents view of a layout. And that gives you a way to access all the different pieces you put in your layout. If you add some text or a couple different map frames, north arrows, they'll all show up in the layout contents. You can drag and drop those up and down to change the draw order. You can do things like lock them so that you don't accidentally pick them up and move them. You can turn on and off the visibility, and you can access all their properties through the contents pane. It's kind of a nice feature and a nice way to work with layouts. As Edie mentioned, we've decoupled the map from the layout, and there's a number of advantages to doing that. Of course, you're working in a project, and a project can have many, many maps and many, many layouts. And we want you to be able to pick and choose which maps you want to add to which layouts, and so we've separated all of that. We've removed the dependencies on printers in Pro. Now, how many of you even knew there was a dependency on a printer in ArcMap? Okay, and why did you know that there was a dependency on a printer in ArcMap? Like, that was all of you. Because, yeah, that was, gentleman up here says because it was dysfunctional. I can't really comment on that, but yes, there were issues. If you ever took a map that you authored in ArcMap that was tied to a certain printer and you moved it to a machine that didn't have that printer, you could get some funny things happening to your layouts. So we've removed that dependency. Layouts are no longer dependent on a printer whatsoever. One of the new things we've added at 1.2 is inline text editing. So the ability to go in and just start editing your text on your layout like you would in a regular graphics application, modern graphic applications. It's what you would expect. And so you get WYSIWYG text editing in your layout. We've also added at 1.2 map series. This is your data-driven pages functionality. So we've started calling it map series again. I'll say it that way. Hopefully that name will be a bit more intuitive to most of you than data-driven pages was. And so map series is now fully supported in ArcGIS Pro. Some of the export improvements. We've made a lot of improvements to export, and Edie mentioned transparency and being able to set transparency on any color. This is a good example. If you look at the map at the top, this is a map from ArcMap, and if you look at the text halos, these are just regular raster halos, the halos you get from a halo on a font symbol or a text symbol. You'll notice it's knocking out all the roads. On the bottom, this is one in ArcMap or in ArcGIS Pro. We're actually just applying a transparency to those, so you can subtly see the roads through the text halo. It's just kind of a nice effect you can get from applying transparency to a color and to a very specific layer within your symbol. So this also holds true all the way through the export process. So when you export this map, you're going to get true native transparency on that halo. In this case, it would be the text halo. And it's not going to rasterize all the layers underneath it. Have any of you guys exported a map and have it create one great big huge raster layer? Yeah, so we don't do that in Pro. That is, we actually support true native transparency. We also support anti-aliasing, which really improves the line crispness, I guess you could say, and the font crispness. If you look at the map at the top, you'll notice that the lines get a little bit of jaggedy as they rasterize. In the bottom, you're going to have much more cleaner line work. We're applying anti-aliasing to our symbols. We also are getting faster exports and sometimes smaller file sizes. So if it doesn't have to rasterize all those layers, it can export it faster. And we've improved all the quality of the drawing. Another thing to kind of talk about, how many of you use map automation, use Python, ArcPy mapping? Okay, a few of you. So ArcPy mapping is fully supported in Pro. Python is fully supported throughout Pro. All of the ArcPy mapping functions are there. We've made some changes to them, though, that you need to be aware of. The biggest change is we quit calling it ArcPy.mapping and started calling it ArcPy.mp. So that's probably the biggest change we made. Then it fits all our other, it fits the naming of all our other Python site libraries, you know, ArcPy.gp, ArcPy.na, all of the other ones that you're used to. Another change that's happened is we've gone from Python 2.7 to Python 3.4. And what that means is there are a few little syntax changes that happened between those two versions. There are things you're going to need to take into account as you start trying to run your Python scripts in Pro. And then another thing that's changed is we're working with projects, as Edie talked about. And projects are groupings of maps and groupings of layouts. You can have many. And because of that, you have to reference them in different ways. You can't just reference a single MXD and know that that only has one layout. You have to reference the project and then which layout you want to work with. So those are just a few little changes that you're going to have to look at if you're moving your Python scripts from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro. So with that, I think we're going to shift over. I'm going to turn it over to Craig, and we're going to get started with some demos.
All right. So what I have here is I have ArcGIS Pro 1.3, and I have a project open. For those of you who are ArcView 3 fans, you may notice that the file extension of an ArcGIS Pro project is an APRX. And that was definitely done on purpose. It was sort of a joke, actually, and then we kind of kept it because we liked it. But we definitely had we actually had a lot of original developers from the ArcView team who wanted to bring back the project metaphor. And I'm just going to take you through ArcGIS Pro and then show some mapping functionality. The first thing you'll notice with Pro is it's a ribbon-based application. And the view type that you have open controls the ribbon appearance of what you see. So we happen to have a map open here. So we see the Maps Home ribbon. This has tools for navigation, common tools for switching base maps, adding data, working with selections, because that's such a common operation in GIS. Things like measure and locate, and then top-level properties for labeling that affect the whole map. You can also do things like insert new content into your project or into your map, like add map notes layers. Analysis is where you go for all your geoprocessing operations. They have a tool gallery here of commonly run tools. You can also access the full suite of 800, 900 plus geoprocessing tools that we have. As well as in newer versions, access some online functionality related to ArcGIS Portal and executing services to do geoprocessing tasks and things like network and raster functions. The View tab is where you manage some properties of the view you currently have open, like the map view. You can convert that to a scene, or you can link to a map view to another map view, or a map view to a scene to keep extents in sync, or just generally manage your windows in the application. Edit tab, available with maps and scenes, has all your editing tools that you're going to need to edit data in your maps. And then finally, sharing is where you can do a variety of things. You can create packages, you can share web maps and web layers, you can share via printing or exporting. So anything where you need to go externally, you do that off the Share tab. So this is just the high-level ribbon. But one of the aspects of the ribbon framework that's really nice in ArcGIS Pro is the idea of contextual ribbons. So when I click on this roads layer, you'll see that this contextual ribbon group for the feature layer opens up. And it has properties for modifying the appearance, properties for modifying labeling, and then a whole slew of functions available for data, like managing the definition query, opening up the attribute table, looking at fields, subtypes, domains, joins, relates, etc. So if I click off from the feature layer context, that goes away. So rather than having 67 toolbars open and having to hunt through them, We're only showing you the information that applies to the item that has context. So that's sort of the ribbon overview. Now, it is a project-based application, and the project window is a primary location where you're going to manage items in your project. So in this particular project, you'll see that I have 3 different maps. I also have a project toolbox that's created for me by default. I have some databases I'm using here, a project database that's created when you create the project, as well as some data that I've added to the map. Geoprocessing history. This map happens to have, or this project happens to have 2 layouts, so multiple layouts supported. I could have many layouts in this project. We've also elevated styles to more of a first-class citizen in the project. So we have some out-of-the-box provided styles. We did a complete overhaul of the symbol sets in ArcGIS Pro to provide new, more modern symbols in 2D and 3D, and integrate things like Color Brewer into the application now. So those great color schemes that Cindy Brewer has designed can now be used in the application easily. And you can also have your own styles. So in this particular case, I have a style that contains a symbol I'll use later in the demonstration. You can also add folder references to the project, so folders that you may be connecting to get file-based data, you can add to the project, as well as locators. Now, the project window isn't just about your local project data. It also is the place you go to connect to ArcGIS Online or to your portal. So I can go here and see the content I have for my account logged in, or I can do things like access Living Atlas content. Now I want to add a hillshade to this map, so I'm just going to do a simple search for hillshade. In the Living Atlas, it's going to return some results, and as I hover over these, you'll see some metadata come up about these various items. I'm just going to pick this one because I know it's the one I want, add to the current map. And when I add this to the map, you're going to see that it added correctly. We put raster data kind of below all the vector data, but it instantly showed through the vector data. And the reason for that is that I have transparency applied to this State Parks and Forests color. So if I open up the color properties, you'll see the RGB values and that this has transparency set on it. So as was mentioned in the presentation from Edie, any color can be transparent in ArcGIS Pro. So you may be used to ArcMap where you could do only layer-based transparency or attribute-driven transparency. We still have those capabilities, but you can do color-based transparency in ArcGIS Pro. And color-based transparency operates differently than layer transparency in that you'll get additive blending of colors. So if you have 2 features overlapping, they'll blend together. Whereas with a layer transparency, it's done as an isolated blend of the entire layer stack. So it adds some capabilities to have some nice cartographic effects. All right, at this point, I want to make some modifications to the appearance of my map, and I'm going to start by looking at labeling. Now, I already showed this labeling ribbon here, where I can see the labeling properties of the current selected layer and the current selected label class. But that's best used in conjunction with the labeling view in the contents window. And if I open up all these layers here, I can see all the label classes down below, and I can actually select all the label classes and do a batch update to all the label classes just with the ribbon commands. So Edie talked a lot about how we've changed the user interface to allow you to do batch updates. In this particular case, I'm going to change the font for all the label classes in my map. Now, doing this in ArcMap would either require writing code, which was how I would do it because it'd be easier, or clicking through hundreds of dialogues. In this particular case, I'm going to pick everyone's favorite font, Comic Sans. And obviously, my map looks terrible. But I've applied that to every label class. And like Edie said, we do have a very strong undo stack in ArcGIS Pro that not only shows, not only works and is predictable, but also shows a stack of updates. So you can see the last thing I did is I updated 33 label class text symbols. And I could just undo that, and it's going to reset my map to where it was. I want to actually choose a real font. You'll see here that we have font previews that show a sample of the text with a little preview. I'm actually going to choose this Source Sans Pro font, and I think I want semi-bold. So that applied to all those layers. I like that, except I don't want to use it for these water bodies. So for these water bodies, I actually want to use Source Serif Pro. You see that it's recognizing recent fonts. I gave this demo yesterday, so it's actually recognizing the fonts that I used recently in the application and bringing them up to the top. So I've set those fonts. I kind of like them. I do want to change the state highway shield. It's not just about going deep into font properties. You can swap out whole text symbols. We have some new shields that we've added to the application. These are designed from scratch, provide updates to the app. So I've updated these state highway shields. And I like the fonts, but I don't like the label placement. So let's talk about changing placement. The first thing I want to do is I want to take a look at this label placement and maybe make some deeper modifications using the power of Maplex. And to do that, I'm going to open up the labeling properties for this class and look at the position tab. So if the properties I want aren't available on the ribbon, I go deeper into a pane and look at those properties. And the first thing I want to do is enable stacking. So if I enable stacking for this, you saw Lower Saranac Lake. You may have missed that. It happened so fast. So I'll undo and reapply so you can see it. It went from unstack to stack. And then it pushed the Adirondack Park Preserve label kind of out of the way when it did that. I want this as a stacked label. What I don't like is I don't like that it's stacked, but it's still hitting that island. So we actually have a placement option for that. Avoid polygon holes, because there's a hole in that polygon. So I've pushed it up to that corner. And that looks pretty good to me, except now I don't like how the Adirondack Park Preserve label is half on the lake and half off. So one of the things I can do is change the feature weight of the lakes. And this will affect labels other than the lake class I'm labeling. I make it 1,000 weight, and it pushes it away from all lakes. So the Adirondack Preserve label just moved out of the way there. So you'll see that with this user interface, I'm using the power of Maplex. I'm changing properties. I'm seeing them applied instantly to my map. I don't have to set them and push through a bunch of dialogues to see my map slowly refresh. You know, the display pipeline is very fast here. That's partly due to the multi-threaded nature of ArcGIS Pro. And we've also moved these properties to a pane so you can focus on your map, make the updates, see how they work, and keep tweaking them. So that's a really powerful part of the ArcGIS Pro experience. Now that's the labels. One other change I want to make is with the railroads here. I don't like this railroad symbol. I want to do something a little bit different. I'm going to open the Symbology pane and move to a unique value renderer. And I'm going to do it by FCC class. Now, I know that tunnels are symbolized differently in many maps than regular above ground railroads. So what I need to do is I need to group the non-tunneled cases. I will do that. I'm going to group these, group those, and I'm going to choose a new symbol. This is for, and this is that style I had in my application, or in my project. And I'm going to choose the railroad symbol again for the tunnel case, but I'm going to make it a lighter gray. So you can see I'm getting in here to changing symbol properties. Very easy to do in the application. And now I'm going to actually go to an extent that has a tunnel, which I found in the data set. You'll see here that there's this Hook Mountain State Park, and the railroad goes through the tunnel and out the other side. And I just made a simple change to the properties of that symbology, and I was able to tweak and apply a nice looking symbol, change the symbol properties easily in the pane without pushing through lots of dialogues. And I think that's about it for me.
Okay, we're back to me. So I want to talk about a couple of newer things in the more recent versions of ArcGIS Pro related to map authoring. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is what we are calling scale-dependent symbology. So often we are making multi-scale maps, especially if we're pushing out to the web. And many of you in this room have probably done this. Traditionally, when you make a multi-scale map, you want more information to draw as you go further and further into a larger scale. And you can see that happening here. As I go larger scale, I'm getting streets drawing. As I come out, less map information is being drawn. Now, typically, the way we do this is with a number of group layers with a lot of duplicated content. We set a definition query on each group layer and set the visibility. And a lot of you have probably done that, and it works. But if you have done it, you know that it's a little bit cumbersome to set up, and it's not super fun to maintain. If you decide you want to change one of those symbols, it's a little bit of a headache. So one of the things we've added, starting at version 1.2, is scale-dependent symbology. We actually added this primarily to support vector tile creation, but independent of vector tile creation, if you're just working with a multi-scale map, this comes in really handy. So what I want you to notice is my table of contents here. It's just a flat list. I don't have all those scale-based group layers. And if I zoom in and out, you can even see my table of contents changing to reflect what's in there. So I want to show you how I've set this up, because it's a lot easier to set up and maintain than that old group layer methodology. So I'll go over here. I'm looking at the roads layer. I'll go over to the Symbology pane. So Craig was just showing you some work in the Symbology pane with the railways. Here I have roads set up by unique value, and these are all my road classes, just like Craig did with the railways. Some of them are grouped, different values. And what's new, starting at version 1.2, which we shipped earlier this year, is this button here, which is the scale range view. So if I flip over to there, what I'm now seeing is scale sliders for each symbol class. And this is what's driving that multi-scale behavior. So this scale range goes from minimum or small scale to large scale, where you're seeing the extent of the slider is the visibility extent of the layer itself, but I'm limiting the scale ranges for each of these layers. So down here to the tiniest, I think these are trails, you know, they don't come on until 1 to 24,000. And I can easily adjust these. You know, I can move them around. I can select them and use a combo box picker. And you might be wondering, where are all those scales coming from? Well, they're actually coming from my map scales, which are here. So we've always had this idea of a list of map scales, but when you're working with scale-dependent symbology, it becomes a little bit more important to have these set up to the scales you actually want to work with. So if you want to change them, you can just click Customize and make changes to this list, or load a tiling scheme, something like that. So this map scale list actually becomes quite important as an input here. So something new we just added at version 1.3, I'm running 1.3 here, it is not yet released, will be soon, is something we call alternate symbols. So alternate symbols means that I can have more than one symbol drawn for a symbol class depending on the scale. So I click somewhere in the scale range, and what I've done, so I'm looking at the streets, these white cased streets, which are value 99. I've just broken that scale range into two. So I have this symbol that's going to be shown at the smaller scale end of the range, and then a a different symbol at the larger end. And I can actually break this into multiple parts. I think for most cases, you're only going to do this for maybe break it into 2 or 3 separate parts. But we support, as many as the scale stops you have. So let's simplify it. The whole reason I want to do this is because when I'm at these smaller scales right now, I still want to see my streets, but they're starting to get a little bit visually heavy and sort of congealing together here. So I'm just going to click the symbol, go to my symbol properties. I'm going to go way over here to the structure tab. This is how the symbol is put together. It's made up of 2 layers. Sort of a white fill and a gray casing. And I'm just going to delete that casing. And go over here and just make the white a little bit smaller. And now what I have is I'm still drawing streets, but they're much more subtle at this scale range. But when I zoom in further, this part of the slider kicks in and I'm getting to the cased, back to the cased roads. Okay. I want to switch gears now over to a new renderer we have, which is called the proportional renderer. In ArcMap, you obviously had a proportional renderer, and we just brought that into ArcGIS Pro starting at version 1.3. So what I have here is point symbols of the city of Hamburg, and right now they're just being drawn with single symbol. So they're all the same symbol, but now in 1.3 I can pick proportional symbol. And I am going to draw them by their crown radius of the tree crown in meters. I'm going to zoom in a little bit because we obviously have a lot of trees. Okay, so this is basic proportional symbol. You can see here we by default get a minimum size and a maximum size of symbol. So what it's doing, here's a histogram showing our data distribution, making the smallest trees, giving them a size of 4 points, and the largest ones in my range, 90 points. But since we have an actual measurement, we're dealing with the crown radius of the trees in meters. I can set the unit here to meters. And we know that the data represents a radius. So now we're starting to get more of a true proportional. So no longer do we have that minimum and maximum. We're actually drawing symbols based on that, the size in the data. And let's make them look a little bit nicer and tree-like. So I'm just setting some simple symbol properties. And now we can see, if we take a look at one of these, it has a radius of 8, and we can actually just go in and measure that. Let's set this not to feet, but to meters. And then I will try my best to measure the radius, and you'll see that we're right about 8 meters there. So you're getting a true representation of the tree canopy with the proportional symbol renderer. Okay, so that's new at 1.3. Something else I want to show you, new at 1.3, is support for KML. So KML data is an XML-based format, and it's pretty commonly drawn in Earth-based browsers, and now we draw KML data in ArcGIS Pro. So it comes in read-only. We can't yet make modifications to the KML, but we can draw it, and we can adjust the visibility and do some basic labeling changes. So you're seeing here a simple KML file. This is in a scene, and we're drawing draped content from the KML. We're at Jackson Hole, Wyoming ski resort, so the runs are these draped blue lines. The orange lines are true 3D. They're in Those are the ski lifts. And then we have support all the pop-ups from the KML. If you're interested in working with KML and you want to get to the actual features, we have a geoprocessing tool called KML to Layer, and that you can use that tool to get your KML into features. A couple other things. KML has a concept of overlays. Ground overlays are what we think of in the ArcGIS world as rasters. So this sea surface temperature is a raster or a ground overlay in the KML file. And then this here, this legend, is what's called a screen overlay. So notice it's static on my screen no matter how I pan and zoom. Some KML files also have this idea of exclusive content, which we support. So you see this by the radio buttons in the table of contents. This isn't something we normally see with feature layers, but the way this KML was authored, it has this exclusive content. So it's going to let me see an 8-day average or a 3-day average or a 1-day average, but I can't turn them all on at once. I wanted to show you the idea of global mode versus scene mode. If you think back to the slides I presented, so here I'm looking at a scene and it's obviously in this global mode. But if I really want to compare what's going on in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean at the same time, it's kind of tough. So instead, I can just go over to a local mode, and now I'm still in 3D. I'm still looking at that 3D KML, but I'm able to see it in projected space and make some comparisons across the globe. So I can put this in any projection. One last thing about KML that we support is the concept of network links. So this is dynamic data. So I'm actually streaming this service. This is flights in and out of Schiphol in the Netherlands, in the Amsterdam airport, and you can see, I think it's kind of late at night there now, so not a lot of flights, but here is one flight that's slowly updating. So we support that idea of dynamic content in KML, or also known as network links. Okay, I'm going to send it back to David for our final demo.
All right, thanks, Edie. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit now. We've talked about authoring labels, and kind of Craig's given you an overview. Edie's gone into some in-depth information about symbology. I'm going to switch and talk about page layout and building a page layout. And for this demo, I'm going to create a little atlas of geology of the Pacific Northwest. And so what I've got is a project. In the project, I have several maps. I have this geology map. I've got an overview map that I'm going to use to show where I'm zoomed into when I'm going from page to page. I've got a title page that I've built already. So I've got a page layout that I've already started and built. What I want to do is kind of go through the process of building a new layout, show you how you would create one, and then adding a map series to that. So I'm going to start by going to the Insert tab, and I'm going to insert a new layout. And I, of course, get some nice thumbnails that give me relative sizes of all the different pages. I'm just going to grab a letter size page to start with. And it's going to create a blank page. And notice I don't have a map on the page. We talked about decoupling the map from the layout. So I have an empty canvas to start working with. I'm going to start by adding some guides to the page. And I can, of course, add one guide at a time. But something new that we have in Pro is the ability to add multiple guides at the same time. And quite often I find when I'm laying out a page, the first thing I do is put guides all the way around the edges. So I'm going to add guides to both the vertical and horizontal direction. And I'm going to add them offset from the edge. And I can go in here and give them a value. So I'm going to offset them 1/2 inch from the edge, hit OK. And you'll notice I get some guides to start working with. And one of the things I know is I'm going to have a title that I want to put up here. So I'm just going to kind of drag this guide down about 1/2 inch. So I'm going to change the position of that guide. And I want another guide in here. I'm going to add one at 7 inches, just a single guide. This gives me a nice little template to start building from. Well, the next thing I'm going to do is actually add a map to my page. So I'm going to go into the Insert tab again, and I'm going to insert a new map frame. Now, a new map frame is a container that contains any of the maps I have in my project. And so I have a large number of maps in here. I can insert them using different methods for what I want my initial extent to be. So I can use the default extent for my entire geology map here. I can use the extent of any views that I have open, or I can use a bookmark that I've created. So I've created a bookmark of this area, and I'm just going to use that as the initial extent that I'm going to add for this map. And then once that's on the page, I can grab the handles, stretch it, drag it, position it kind of how I want. I've got guides in here. It's going to snap to the guides by default. I can turn on and off snapping if I want. But I'm just going to position that on my page as a starting point. I'm also going to insert another map frame for my overview map. And I've got another bookmark here, so I'll insert another map to my page. And I'm going to drag that over into this position here and make that a bit smaller. Now I actually want to zoom in a little bit closer in this map. So in Pro we have basically a concept called activating a map frame. We have this concept in ArcMap, but most of you might not think of it that way. But in ArcMap you can double click a map frame and you get little hash marks that go around the outside. Then you've activated that map frame and you can do things with it, move things around and add things to it. We find that you can accidentally adjust the position of your map very easily when you're doing that double click operation. So in Pro we've actually made it very specific. If you want to go in and change the extent of your map while you're in layout, you need to actually activate that map. So I just right clicked and hit activate. There's some other places you'll find activate. But what it's done, you'll notice it's grayed out everything around the map I'm working in. So I know I'm working in that map. And I can then pan and zoom and adjust the location of this map. You'll also notice that the context menus update when I activate my map. I'm suddenly working in the map rather than the layout. This allows me to have one set of pan and zoom tools, so you don't need a separate set of pan and zoom tools for the layout and the separate set for the map. This experience just makes it much nicer to work with. So I'm going to just click the X, deactivate that, and we'll come back to my layout. So now all my pan and zoom tools work in my layout itself. Well, let's go in and add a few other things to my map. I'm going to insert a north arrow. And you've got all the different north arrows you have from ArcMap, all the ones you've come to know and love. And I'm just going to insert one on the page. And I'll make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. And I'll snap that to the edge. And I'm going to insert a scale bar. Again, all the same scale bars you've had in the past in ArcMap. And I'm going to drop that. Now, one thing you're going to notice, as I'm positioning this scale bar, do you see the little blue dashed line showing up? So this is something we've implemented. It's called element snapping. Element to element. So it's this, if you've used PowerPoint, you'll find this in there. What we do is automatically figure out where the other elements' positions are, and we can automatically snap to those. It gives you a really nice way to lay out a map. You can, of course, turn this on and off if you want, but I positioned that and basically aligned it to the center of my north arrow without having to set up a guide, without having to set up any special snapping. So I've inserted my scale bar. I might want to make some changes to the properties of my scale bar. And with each one of the elements, you're going to get a Format tab and a Design tab. The Design tab typically gives you the properties of the element. So if I wanted to change, and rather than adjusting the division value, I wanted to adjust the number of divisions, I can make that change in the ribbon. And then as my scale changes, that will change. And I can go to the Format tab if I want to change the colors or the fonts or anything the scale bar is using. So I've got access to all those properties right in the ribbon. Just really quickly access and make those kinds of changes. I also mentioned the contents pane. And you'll notice that as I've been adding elements to the page, the page, I've got my different maps showing up. I've got my north arrow, my scale bar, and I can do things like lock that north arrow so I can't accidentally pick it up and move it. I can position all my elements and just keep them there. It's really a nice feature. All right, I'm going to insert a couple of other things on the page. The next thing I'm going to insert is a legend. And one of the things I'm going to do is before I insert the legend, this is a little trick, I'm just going to select the layer I want in my legend in my table of contents. In ArcMap, when you go to insert a legend, you get a wizard. And that wizard allows you to pick the layers that are going in to your legend. This way we can pick those layers in advance and just drag and drop a legend on the page and get the layers you want. You don't have to go through the entire wizard to set it up. And you'll notice it created a legend. It made the font quite small. So I'm just going to go into my Format tab, and I'm going to adjust the font. And we'll make that a different font. And it's created a legend for me. And then I'm going to insert some text on my map. I'm going to put a title on. I can pick the symbol that I want to use as I add my piece of text. And again, you'll notice I've got smart snapping going on, or element snapping. And I can put a piece of text on the map. And I'm just going to call this Pacific Northwest, geology. Now, did you see what I just did there? I just edited the text on the layout. I didn't have to go to a separate box to do it. This is like one of my favorite new features. Anyway, so you have WYSIWYG text editing on the layout itself. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I've kind of got my layout created. I'm going to now take this and build a map series with it. Can I turn the service credit off? I can. I hope it comes back. Oh, this. Oh, yes, you can. What you do is you add a piece of dynamic text, and there's a service layer type of dynamic text. You add that, it's going to pop it out of the map frame and put it on the layout, and then you can position it somewhere else. Yeah. Let me get to questions. Let me just get this built, and then we'll answer some questions. Thanks. All right. So I'm going to go to my Layout tab. And in here I have a Map Series button. And I can go in, and I'm going to add a spatial map series. Now, those of you who've used data-driven pages, this is going to be very familiar because it's the same sort of setup. I enable my map series. I pick a map frame that I'm going to use. I'm going to pick a layer. And I'm going to use the counties in the Pacific Northwest. And this is this US Pacific Northwest layer. I'm going to pick a name field. And then I'm going to pick a field to sort all my page names by. And I'm just going to use state name for this. And there's a reason I'm doing that. And this is the reason, is I've got under optional fields something that you don't have in ArcMap. I have the ability to group my pages by an attribute. So I'm also going to group them by state name. So I've got many counties in each state, and I want to organize them into, state by state groupings. So I'm grouping by state name. I've got other attributes I can use. I could specify a rotation angle based on an attribute or a spatial reference and change the projection for each map if I wanted. I'm not going to do that for this. And then I'm going to set my map extend option. I'm going to set it to best fit. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a margin, so a 15% margin. Then I'm just going to hit OK. And what it's going to do is it's going to zoom me to the first county. And this would be Boundary County, Idaho. And I can then step through and look at the other counties. Now, one thing I've got going on here is since all the counties have geology in them, I want to actually highlight the county I'm on and only show the geology in that county. So I'm going to go over to my table of contents. I'm going to turn on this mask layer that I've set up. It's just basically just a layer over the top of my pages. And what I want to do is cut out a donut hole where my current county is. And so under properties, in ArcMap we had this concept of a dynamic definition query. And that way you could go in and set up a property that updated based on your map series properties within your definition query. That got a little confusing. It got hard for people to find. And so we've changed the concept a little bit. Instead of being part of your definition query, we've added something called a page query. And so what it will do is update an attribute based on a page that you're on. So in this case, I want to filter, and I want to only show the mask features that don't match the name of my current county. And what this is going to do is show all the ones outside of it. And when I hit OK with that, it's going to cut out a little donut hole around the county I'm on. So if I go back to my groupings, if I go to another county, Idaho County, Idaho, you'll see that it's highlighting the county in the middle by just showing the geology of that county. I can do the same thing with my overview map. So my overview map, I only want to show the county that I'm on. So on that one, I'm going to go in to my current page that I'm on and go into the properties. In this case, I'm going to set the same page query up where the name, only in this case, I'm going to say matches the name of my map. And then it's going to only show me the map with the same name. It looks like there are 2 counties in those states that have the same name. So Adams, yeah, that's pretty common. Let's go to Boise. There we go. It's not going to be 2 Boise's, I hope. So one thing you're going to notice as well is I've been working with these in a contents view. How many of you ever used the DS Mapbook Developer Sample? Any of you? A few of you? Okay. Do you remember in that there was a contents view of all your pages? Maybe not. That was greatly missed when we came out with data-driven pages. So I just want to point out we've added that in Pro. So you've got a contents view. You still have the arrows down here at the bottom. You'll see you can step through pages one at a time or jump to the very last page. But you now have a view of all the pages. So the other thing I'm going to add to this now that I've got my map series working is dynamic text. So we've got dynamic text. I'm just going to filter this for just the map series text. And I'm going to add a page name. And in this case, I am actually going to open it up and edit it in this window. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to accidentally blow away my dynamic text tags. So I'm going to change this so it says, in this case, Butte County. And we'll apply that. And I'm going to go into my Format tab, and I'm just going to center align that so that it grows from the center out, and just position it over my legend. And one more piece of dynamic text, I'm going to insert a page number. So I'll insert page number with count, and I'll drop this down here on the page somewhere. And so now when I switch pages, let's go to Oregon, and I can go. I like all the county names in Oregon; they're fun. Multnomah and Hood River, Wasco. And step through those pages, you'll notice the dynamic text is updating, the page numbering is updating, my scale bars update. And now, of course, I want to be able to share this. So I'll go export it. And when I go to export, I'll drop it on my desktop. And under export options, if I'm going to a PDF file, I have options to export the pages of my map series. And I can export them all into a single file. I can export them as separate files. I can export all the pages or just the current page, or I can set a reference number of pages. So I can just say 56 through 58 and hit go and export. And that's going to create three pages for me. And very fast, that's done. Let's find it. Here we go. And so here are the pages that I exported in a single PDF file with everything updating. Map series in ArcGIS Pro. So that was what I was planning on showing you guys today. Let's jump back to Edie.
So we're all done. I just wanted to put up the pro releases up here. Like I said, we're almost done with 1.3. There's a lot more information on what's coming in Pro in the Road Ahead sessions, which there's one more tomorrow and one Friday.
After this.
After this.
Immediately after this, in this room? 6B. It's a Road Ahead session. So if you want to see what's coming in future Pro releases. And I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah. Oh.
Did you still have a question about service credits or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the same as it is in ArcMap. It's the same way.
Okay, any questions? Yes.
So the color blue ramps, how does that get handled? Because like you have a red, yellow, blue ramp that's 5 colors, and then you put something 6 colors. It's not necessarily the same colors. Does it smart enough to realize that?
Okay, so the question is about color brewer ramps, and if you're applying it to like 3 classes or 4 classes. When you crack open our color brewer style, you'll see that we actually have them all built out, all the ones. So we have the 3 class, 4 class, 5 class, all the ones that Cindy made, and then we also have continuous schemes that closely approximate those as well. So they're all in there. And by default, you get RGB versions, but you can also open up a CMYK version of that entire style.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Someone else? Yes. Yep, you.
So can you have the legend dynamically update based on what the contents of your current map that you're looking at? Currently, no, we don't have that in Pro. We have it in ArcMap. It's something we're working on for the next release. We plan on releasing 1.4 around December, and we've got that on our plan for that. Good question.
Yes, right here, first row.
I'm wondering how it works in a collaborative environment. Is it more geared towards one ArcGIS Pro project per person, or is it shared across a group working on a project?
Who wants to take this one? Do you want me to take it? You want to take it?
Yeah, the Pro project is not really configured for multi-user editing.
Okay.
Obviously, the contents in the project can be shared, layers and things like that. But in terms of multi-user editing a single project and updating, styling of a single project, it's not really designed for that.
So if you have it stored on a network, say in a project directory, and you have a number of users working on that project, the project's being used, not in Pro sense, but so it wouldn't necessarily work that way. Someone like a coworker couldn't open my project and get in there.
Well, they could open it if you're not open, if you don't have it currently open. Yeah, because otherwise you're just going to overwrite each other when you do updates. If you're editing, multiple people are editing the same project on disk, it'd be sort of like last one in on the save wins.
Right.
Right. So just.
It doesn't give you like a read on this is open. Right, kind of like an ArcGIS.
Yeah, I mean, you should. I actually haven't done it. You should get an experience like that. It's just like the issue is there isn't a way to resolve conflicts. If 2 people are making edits to the same project, how do you merge those?
Right.
That's why we can't support that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Boundary problem. I think you used the example of the plenary where you had a search grid. This square has been searched and this one hasn't. But because if you're trying to symbolize that just on the basis of the symbology used for the outline of the polygon, they clobber each other, and you can't tell. I mean, just resolution of representing polygon boundaries that have different. If I searched this square and I haven't searched that square, which symbology is applied to the boundary of the adjoining polygon? I guess I'm not making sense.
No, I think you're making sense. I think that.
I want it red, and I want to be able to see which polygon.
Okay, so the question is like, what determines the order of sort of draw for polygons when they have outlines. And by default, feature order is determined by what's returned from the database. So if you have two polygons next to each other, whichever one gets returned first draws underneath, you know, the next one.
So you put them in there twice, and you do a selection depth query on one set, and put in a copy of the other, and so it's you let you twice. That's how I resolve it.
So yeah, so one way to resolve that is what you were saying, which is duplicate content. Another way is to use symbol layer drawing. It's called symbol level drawing. In ArcMap, we call it symbol layer drawing in Pro, where you can manage which symbols layers draw in what order, and you could manage a controlled stack of that draw order to have it be deterministic.
So there is a new functionality to resolve that in Pro.
Well, that functionality existed in ArcMap. It also exists in Pro. Most people, when they think of symbol layer drawing, think about it in terms of roads and road casings. It can be used with polygons, and a lot of times it's used to resolve these sort of border issues with polygon ordering.
Were you also talking about dashed symbols, or?
Well, that's an issue too.
Okay, because one of the other approaches you could take is, like I said, we've merged the representation model, so that means that all of the geometric effect capabilities that we had in the representation model are in the Pro symbol model. So you can do things like add control points at vertices, and what that would do is you'd still technically be drawing the same boundary twice, but if it was a dashed line, using the control point functionality, you'd get those dashes in the same phase so they wouldn't cancel each other out.
Yeah, so you could do alternating dashes then.
Yeah.
So you can do all sorts of things to make things interleave
Yeah.
if you desire.
Okay, yes, right here.
All right, think back to ArcGIS.
Okay.
The halo, which was the best halo ever produced. It was a true glow.
Yep.
Now we have ArcMap, and it never ever, it just doesn't outline as a halo, which is terrible. Sorry, I'm just playing it again. Are you ever going to bring, with ArcGIS Pro, I hope maybe you bring that back, but I notice it still has the, I'm just outlining, I'm not doing a true, you know, halo or glow effect, true halo effect, put it that way. Are you going to bring that and make it a private? They always kept saying, oh, we'll do that in ArcMap. Are you going to do that with ArcGIS Pro?
Okay, so the question is, can I do an ArcIMS style halo? ArcIMS's halo was fairly unique. Some people really love it. I can tell you do. Some people really hate it. So one of the problems with doing that in ArcMap is it required transparency, really, to do it. In Pro, you can actually apply any fill symbol to a halo. And one of the ones we have in the gallery is a gradient. So because any color can be transparent in Pro, that means any color scheme can go from fully opaque to fully transparent. So you can get probably 90% of the way to an IMS glow in Pro with a halo that has a gradient on the fill pattern going to transparent.
Yeah, we just have to, the radius would have to go along the arc of the outline of the text, which would be really creative.
No, I know. Take a look at it and see if Pro meets your needs with it. We've authored it. It exists.
Part two, the APRX file. The APR files in the old 3X days were text files, which are great because if they got corrupted, you go in and fix them. Not so with the MXD, since it's binary. Is the APRX, I'm assuming with the X, is that a text file again?
The APRX file is a zip file that if you unzip it, is filled with XML.
Perfect, okay. And
What I would say is what's actually easier to edit, one of the options on the Share tab of, say, the map view is the ability to export to what we call a map file. It's a file with an extension mapx. That's the same content as what's written into the APRX, but it's written in JSON, and it's a little bit easier to edit. The other thing you'll notice is that layer files, which are LYRX files, which I'm trying to call lyrics files. I'm trying to get that to catch on. Lyrics files. You could spread the word. They're JSON as well. So if you want it, like one of the things I'll personally do is if I open some data source and like the paths are like a total mess, I open some project, paths are a total mess, I can do the path repair, or I could just save the thing out to a mapx file, edit it, and then re-import it, and all my paths are fixed.
And just one more quickie. PostScript, we're still going to require a PostScript for transparency printing.
Okay, so PostScript as a language, so the question is, do we require transparency for or PostScript for transparency in printing? PostScript as a language does not support transparency.
Yes, it does. In fact, you cannot.
It does not.
You can't print transparency. PCL does not support transparency. PostScript does.
PostScript does not support transparency. It supports overprinting, which is different than transparency.
Yeah, at least it gives you that transparent effect where you get a PDF or whatever, or an export, you can get whatever you have reproduced is, let's say ArcMap. Take ArcMap as an example. You can reproduce that on a PostScript printer, but you can't on a PCL printer. So it requires PostScript to even create that effect. Now, are we still going to require PostScript to create that effect on the output?
Okay, my PCL knowledge is lacking, but with print, if you need to go to an external file and not print to a printer directly, most onboard RIPs support PDF nowadays on the printers. Our PDF has true transparency, which means when we write a PDF out of Pro, it has vectors with a transparency setting. And if the RIP supports that, it's going to go cleanly through. And what you'll see is because we're not rasterizing at like a high DPI and running a raster layer in the PDF, the file sizes for vector output are way smaller, which means the whole export is faster as well. So you have a lighter PDF to send to a printer. Now, when you send it to the printer, the onboard raster image processor, the RIP, has to do the RIP, which could be pretty memory intensive. If you add things like masking, for instance, it's pretty memory intensive. But most modern RIPs support PDF with transparency fine.
Okay, one more here.
In the map series, you have different page numbering systems for each state. Like when you group things by state, you have a separate page numbering system for Oregon and Washington.
All right, so when you group all your pages by state or group them by whatever category you want to group them, can you have a different page numbering system for each grouping? This is a very good question. And I hate to tell you this, but the answer is no, not right now. We don't have a way to do that. You would have to go into Python and write a Python script that would update that specifically. So the Python arcpy.mp module works very well with map series. You can access all the pages and make adjustments to pages as you're exporting and doing things like that. And one of the things you can do is just put a text element on and update that to say whatever you want through a Python script. And that would be, I think, the only way to do what you're trying to do right now. It is a very good requirement, though. I'm going to take that back. Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you'd like or have time, if you could go enter that in the Ideas site, which is now on GeoNet, by the way. The Ideas site moved about 2 weeks ago to GeoNet. It's much better integrated with the rest of our things. So yeah, please go put an idea in for that, and we'll look at it. But thank you very much.